Welcome to BeyondBIM. How often do we hear about the problem of interoperability discussed ad nauseam? And how often do we feel as though a discussion on the solution is still missing? We've all heard about IFCs and semantic web, but what about connection profiles? Today's episode, I'm pleased to bring to you a discussion with Anto Budiardjo on the potential solution to the interoperability conundrum. This is mainly to discuss the potential solution to keeping the digital threads and digital fabrics in the digital twin world in a constant connection and with system integration. Anto is a veteran in the connected building space. Since 1989, he has led the development and promotion of building connectivity and integration technologies. His first product, the CdC Engine, first installed in 1991, was deployed widely in the UK and Europe through integrators and OEMs. The so-called engine was the first PC-based integration platform and a graphical user interface for buildings. But today, Anto is focused on a new venture to bring system integration into the internet era with an online integration and collaboration platform called paddyio. Core to his current work is the advocacy of connection profiles, an integration mechanism created by Paddy, and now being adopted as an open mechanism by digital twin communities, including the Digital Twin Consortium. This tool really could be a stepping stone for integration for building twins and beyond. And now, let's hear more from Anto directly on system integration for digital twins. So thank you, Anto, for joining us on BeyondBIM.
It's a pleasure.
We'd like to start off with finding out a little bit more about paddyio and what has been the mission of this platform since founding it.
Thanks for the question, and thanks for having me on this podcast. I have been focused on integration of systems in and around buildings since 1990, so for about 30 years. So I've built about half a dozen platforms over those years, both in Europe and in the US. And so Paddy is a take on integrating systems in the age of the internet. Right. We now have this thing called the internet where everything's connected to it. We have the Internet of Things. Right. So there are obviously many different integration platforms that use the internet, but it's not centered around the internet. It's not built in the internet age. Right. So Paddy is exactly that. We started Paddy, the project, about 3 years ago. And the thinking was that we have all of these different systems now on the internet using common user interface technology, HTML, and using all sorts of REST APIs and things all on the internet. Right. So why are we building integration platform that doesn't actually use that? Why do we try and build a box, whether it's hardware or software, to try and sort of ingest and normalize data, which is sort of do it the old way? So Paddy is a take on doing integration using the internet, and it aggregates user interfaces as well as allowing data integration from any 2 points on the internet. So that's really sort of our mission.
So from your work to date and with the mission that entails around Paddy, do you foresee that integration in the AEC world may improve in more recent times? And if so, how do you foresee that happening?
I think it has to improve, right? I think I think we all know that data is key to a lot of digital twin or smart systems, or however you want to sort of structure the conversation. And data that's not used, the data is not flowing, data is not going to the places where data can be used to inform decision making, is really not very good. I mean, it's not very good to have data that's not used, right? So the flow of data across all of the different systems in and around buildings and other assets is really key. right? So I don't think there is a future in this industry without really sort of acknowledging that data is important and moving data between different systems and using it in a way that is beneficial to the purpose of all of our sort of professional sort of aspirations is really key.
If we follow that thread of data, and you already mentioned digital twins as well, where would you say we are with the current state of digital twins in the built environment? If we take your perspective as an outsider, you said you have had extensive experience in IoT automation. So if you take a glimpse into the AEC sector, what would you say the current state is?
I think the current state is probably two words: data silos. Right, there is a lot of data because a lot of manufacturers and a lot of technologies have created a lot of really cool and useful technologies and products and services, but in the main, they are still siloed, right? And they're still sort of 20th century thinking of data. Right, so for data to flow, silos. There may need to be silos because silos really sort of reflect what needs to happen within a domain, and they're very focused on whatever it is, whether it's lighting or other disciplines. But the fact that it's very difficult to move data between these silos makes it really, really difficult to get a holistic sort of understanding of what's going on. Not just at any given stage of a building life cycle, but through the building life cycle, all the way from conceptualization, design, construction, and all the way to operation and maintenance. So the siloing is I would say, the biggest challenge in buildings, and that has a technology sort of impact because it makes technology not difficult to work, but it has a huge impact also, the siloing effect on the sort of the business of extracting the business value of all of this technology. Right, so it makes it really difficult to convey or to talk about the business value of all of these different systems if they're siloed. Right, so I think somehow making the data flow is good from a technology perspective, but also good from a perspective of demonstrating and actually doing the use of data for whatever purpose was necessary.
And to improve that data flow, I believe you've done some work on data integration. Can you talk us through a little bit more about what you've done to overcome one of the biggest challenges that the AEC industry faces?
So, having been thinking about integration for 30 years and built a number of platforms and seen many others, we know how not to do it. One of the sort of challenges technically when you want to connect systems together is just the large number of protocols and semantics and ontologies and sort of different ways people actually think about information and how they transport data. And the sort of the traditional way to solve that is, let's create another standard or another ontology that's going to be better than everybody else. And all you get at the end of that process is yet one more ontology or protocol, right? So that doesn't really solve the problem. And so the mechanism that we created about 18 months ago is called connection profiles. So connection profile has a sort of a different way to think about integration. Connection profile basically takes a use case, right, of why system A needs to talk to system B to perform a specific function, whatever that function is, right? So it's very, very clear. A needs to talk to B to do X, right? that is a sort of what we describe as an integration use case. So what happens with connection profile is you take that use case and you codify it, right? So you basically say, okay, when you want to do that, A connecting to B to do that, these are the ways to do it, because there may be more than one way of doing it, right? So the one way of doing it is to use this particular technology, which is a pub sub or some other API. Another way of doing it is using other sort of REST APIs and other mechanisms, right? So what happens is you codify them, and you may end up with multiple connection profiles that define exactly how A needs to talk to B to do X, right? And the profiles then are given names. They're unique in the same way that domain names are unique. There's only one CNN.com, so all connection profiles have names. So the names are a reflection of how to do that use case that was actually the foundation of the creation of that connection profile, right? So what then happens is that manufacturers of products and systems and services would develop their product or implement sort of code within their product to be compatible with certain connection profiles that make sense to them, depending on what their product is, either to be a server of information or to be a consumer of information, right? So you build that into your product, right? So Acme product would have a certain connection profile and say, I can be a server to that. And another product will actually say, I can be a client of that. And when they meet at the project, at installation time, when they meet a broker, and Paddy is a broker to do exactly this. So this is the relationship between the two. But a broker can then say, okay, you need to connect, right? And that connection is not a complicated process. It may require some configuration, but basically it's a plug and play mechanism. And the products on both ends would then know how to behave to actually allow data to flow, right? So it actually then creates the communication path, right? So connection profiles is, we think, is a key way of doing that. And it really is sort of thinking about the integration problem in the internet sort of context, right? Because the key thing about connection profile is that we don't try and normalize the data, right, to whatever Paddy wants it to be, right? We don't actually do that. The connection profile allows the connection, the data flow to actually occur across the internet using whatever profile, whatever protocol and whatever semantics and ontologies and everything else that is needed by that particular use case. So each connection profile have different methodologies of communicating, but when they come across each other in the field, they'll know how to behave. Right, so that dramatically reduces the installation cost and also the maintenance cost of integration between systems. So connection profile is being sort of going through the sort of process of validating it and making sure that it actually does what it's promising to do. We put it into the public domain as an open source mechanism a few months back, and it's making its way through the Digital Twin Consortium in the US as a way of integrating systems to make systems interoperable with each other using this mechanism.
And I'm guessing that from what you describe, this connector is applicable not just for the built environment, really. Is it irrespective of which sector you're operating in? Correct.
It that sort of makes it really interesting in the context of digital twins, because digital twins is obviously not just about buildings, it's about infrastructure, sort of mining and minerals and aerospace and even sort of human health, right? So one of the things that we're doing within the Digital Twin Consortium is to sort of explore how the applicability of connection profile in these different verticals, right? We don't know yet whether it will be applicable to all, and that's kind of the process. We know we have a pretty good understanding that in the infrastructure space with buildings and sort of those kind of assets, it has a lot of potential. But yes, very, very broad application area.
So how could one get started with connection profiles? let's say I'm an organization, I'm interested in improving the data flows. Do I need to hire a data scientist, a data specialist to deal with these connectors? How can I get started with using them?
There's probably a role for data scientists in the middle of all of that, but I would hope that it becomes almost sort of, as I mentioned earlier, sort of a plug and play mechanism, because data scientists are far and few between and they're expensive, right? So one of the problems is, I think I mentioned this earlier, scalability. If you're relying on data scientists every time you want to connect two systems, we're not going to get anywhere, right? So connection profile is all about sort of making integration scalable by making it really simple to do, so that you don't need data scientists. You obviously need data scientists to think about what connection profiles you need in the first place when you design it, but not on a project by project level. In terms of engagement, we're having this sort of conversation. It's still early stages, but the concept of connection profile itself is very well sort of defined. It may not be the sort of the final thing. It may sort of morph a little bit, but it's pretty clear. So it's being discussed in the DTC significantly. So join the DTC and be part of that. I was just yesterday, in fact, named a chair of a new Tiger team within the DTC specifically to do with interoperability. So there'll be a lot of sort of discussions about connection profiles in that group within the as well as other areas within the DTC, and hopefully with other digital twin initiatives around the world. I know in the UK, obviously, there's CDBB. We're very keen to see how connection profiles can fit into that, the thinking that's going on in the UK. We're having sort of discussions about how it can help what the Industry 4.0 people are doing in Germany with the asset administration shell. We think that plays very nicely to the concept of connection profile. So get involved right now. Most of the activities in the DTC, but I'd be happy to also liaise with other individuals and other sort of initiatives around digital twins and sort of smart systems.
Now, I know that a lot of the work that you've done centers around data integration, and this connector profile sounds very exciting. Connection profile sounds very exciting to those of us who are constantly hearing the constant repetition that there isn't enough interoperability between these systems. And that if we do want to solve the digital twin problem, we need to start at the data level or the digital thread level. Now, what might you consider some of the bigger data challenges that we're still trying to overcome?
I think sort of areas like governance and privacy and sort of ownership and access of data is going to be are going to be sort of issues that we need to address, right? So in a way, we know those are issues that need to be addressed, but because it's so hard to integrate data, it's so hard to make them interoperable, we kind of have the opportunity of sort of kicking that ball down the road a little bit, right? But I would suspect that if connection profiles becomes the mechanism to do this, right, that makes it scalable and makes it easy to do, then it also provides a mechanism to address and to help manage the privacy and governance of data and who has access to data, and also create an opportunity of sort of economic opportunity around data, right? A lot of people say data needs to flow, and data is the new oil, and there's value when it flows. Okay, so how do you do that? If I have data, it's worth a lot, right? But it's only worth a lot if it's used, right? So there's kind of a marketplace and a sort of mechanism that's sort of needed for data to be monetized or sort of used and actually sort of be turned into value, both for the creator of the data or the collector, whoever sort of has the responsibility of doing that, as well as the consumers of data. So I think once we figure out how to make data flow, there's all of the regulation and rules and stuff to do with data that we then have to obviously deal with before the data can sort of flow in the sort of the way that we anticipate.
Great. And I guess for those that would be interested in getting access to these types of integration platforms, where could our listeners find out more about paddyio?
Paddy.io is the domain address of the Paddy platform. The paddy.io itself, if you go there, there's actually not that much information on it because we're still in the process of building it. You can actually log in and use paddy.io. There is, if you go to paddy.io/about, there's a little bit more information, but not a huge amount. Again, as we're sort of finalizing the product, if people are interested in sort of understanding a lot more about the sort of what's behind all of this and what the plans are, I'm very happy to have a conversation just by email or through LinkedIn or other mechanisms. And the other side of it is obviously, as I mentioned, the DTC, the Digital Twin Consortium. There's a lot of integration and connection profile related activities there. Happy to do that.
And finally, a heartfelt thank you to all of our followers who have been with us so far. If you enjoyed this episode, then please follow us on LinkedIn or YouTube. And better yet, share this episode with your friends and colleagues.